Stripping down science. The Naked Scientists.
Hello, welcome to this week's edition of The Naked Scientists. And this week, we're going in search of the reason that a crowd turns into a riot. We'll be talking to Clifford Stott from the University of Liverpool, who works on football hooliganism, and also John Drury from the University of Sussex. And one of the things we'll be looking at is the best way to get people out of a dangerous situation and evacuated to safety. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello. And to take a completely different flight of fancy, Gaye Gibson's here from the University of Greenwich, and she works on how it is that a male mosquito can spot a female mosquito, and vice versa. Cat.
Always seems to be me. They're just always trying to mate with me. I hate them. Anyway, we're going to be finding out the scientific way not to forget those email attachments. Look of recognition around everyone here. Yeah, how many times you've sent that big email to loads of people at work, find enclosed the attachment. Oh no, sorry everyone. Anyway, so scientists have been on the case with that. Scientists have also been measuring happiness. So which countries around the world are the happiest? Which are the most miserable? Here's a quick teaser for you. Are we happier or less happy than France here in the UK? What do you reckon?
I reckon the French are happier than we are. I reckon, Gaye, what do you think?
Could be.
I reckon happier.
So I think the French are happier than the English.
We
Because
right?
they have sun, they have good food.
The people that are professionally miserable are the Germans, aren't they?
No, apparently not. No, we are actually more cheerful than France and less cheerful than Germany. But we'll be bringing you full news of that later. And also, researchers have come up with a way to prevent doctors leaving things inside patients when they operate. Things like scalpels, swabs, golf clubs, nurses, and also some news about oil-eating bugs, which could be a way to clear up oil slicks in the future.
And also coming up, Kitchen Science. Now, we want your full participation in this week's Kitchen Science. It is amazing. You'll be gobsmacked when you try this. What you'll need is a shelf from your oven, hopefully one that's clean and not hot. So try and choose a shelf that's not been cooked on for a little while. You'll need 2 bits of string to connect onto that oven shelf, 2 fingers, preferably your own, and yourself. You'll also need a wooden spoon or something similar to hit your oven shelf with. You will be amazed, and we'll be joining Derek, who is out there at Hinchinbrook School with Dave and a couple of assistants this evening to do this experiment. So go and grab those things if you have the chance.
The Naked Scientists podcast, powered by UK Fast, the UK's best hosting provider. On the web at ukfast.net.
Now, at the beginning of last week's show, I told you that for the teaser, we wanted to know what is the gas that comes out of your kettle when you add some acid to it, when you've got a furred-up element and it fizzes. The answer was, of course, carbon dioxide.
And this week we want to know, what is that substance that makes plants look green and enables them to soak up sunlight and carbon dioxide to make their food and oxygen? We've got a ton of amazing prizes. Petro is scraping his prize barrel as we speak. Yep, scraping the prize barrel, got loads of prizes to give away. And also, because we're talking about crowd behaviour and things like that, we've been given a book by Kate Fox, who's at the Social Issues Research Centre in Oxford, and she's written a book called Watching the English. It's the hidden rules of English behaviour. So if you've wanted to know where do we get our queuing instinct from, where do we get our nice cut glass accents from, how do we behave, what do we get up to in the pub, this is the book for you. So get phoning in for our quiz, for our teaser. What's that green substance in plants? Any questions you've got on crowds or even on mosquitoes, get phoning in 08459 25 2000. Text us 07786 20 1960. And there's always the email, chris@nakedscientist.com.
Now, talking of emails, how often has it happened to you that you've sent an email saying, see the attached, and then you get one back about 10 days later from someone saying, we didn't attach it? Have you done that? I know, I've
Yes,
lots of times.
All the time.
There's a couple of people over in America who are obviously having this problem, and Fernando Pereira and his research group at the University of Pennsylvania reckon they've now got the answer, because they went to the now defunct US company Enron, and they got 8,000 emails from that company, which were in the public domain, and they've written a computer program that scoured through those emails looking for the cardinal features of when an attachment should be connected to an email. So all the sort of giveaway clues of what you tend to write in an email when there was going to be an attachment on it. And they've now got that computer program which can run at the same time as you're writing an email. It'll analyse your email, see if it thinks that there's an attachment that should be there that you've forgotten to add, and then it pops up a little notice saying, perhaps you should be adding an attachment here. And they did a little test to see if it was any good, and they found that 85% of the time it manages to pick up and warn people when they've forgotten to attach their attachment.
Is it going to be one of those really annoying paper clips?
Yes, I was just thinking of that because I actually got sent a very funny attachment this week, actually, and it said it had a sort of version of that paperclip, and it was someone beginning to write a letter on a Microsoft product, and it said, "Dear all, I've decided to end my life because I can't carry on anymore." And then the paperclip pops up, and it says, "This looks like a suicide note. Would you like help with?"
We should kill all paperclips. Anyway, scientists at the University of Leicester have been working on the first ever world map of happiness. Obviously, the most happy countries are those who don't have to deal with paperclips in their computer programs. But anyway, Adrian White, who's a social psychologist at Leicester, has been compiling the information from a load of studies. So he's looked at over 100 scientific studies of happiness that include surveys of 80,000 people worldwide. And he's come up with a map of happiness. Now, happiness is a very important thing to study. A few months ago, David Cameron was all about, new Conservatives, new happiness, or whatever. And also, a recent BBC survey found that more than 80% of the population think that the government should focus on making us happy rather than making us wealthy. So it's not all money.
They don't seem to do that, though, do they?
Well, they don't seem to do
Gordon
either.
Brown seems quite hell-bent on making me less wealthy, actually, as far as I can tell.
But he probably wants to make you happy and give you a big cuddle. Something like that. Anyway, so they've come up with this map that you can actually find at the University of Leicester website. That's www.le.ac.uk. And guess what the top most happy country in the world is?
I think it's in Europe, but I can't remember. I'm torn between probably Denmark. I don't think it's Germany because I think they're professionally unhappy, or at least they always look unhappy, don't they, German people? I'm going to go either Italians because they're really laid back, or perhaps Spain because they're really laid back, or Denmark because they're just wealthy.
It's actually Denmark. Denmark's the happiest country in the world based on health, wealth, and the provision of education and sort of those things that feed into happiness.
And the beer, of course.
And the beer. The next two are Switzerland and Austria, followed by Iceland and the Bahamas.
So come on, where are the most miserable places in the world then?
Well, we go down. The USA comes in at 23, which isn't bad. Germany's at 35. The UK's at 41.
So we're quite a miserable lot then.
But this is out of 178 countries. But we do beat France, who are languishing at 62. So the most miserable countries, the bottom three, are the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe and Burundi. So these are not, they're war zones. There's a lot of problems there. There's corrupt governments.
And what about Moss Side? Is that on the list?
Moss Side is not yet ceded from the UK, Chris.
There was a sort of internal survey of happiness done in the last 5 years of the UK, and I think the most unhappy place in the UK was somewhere in Manchester, actually.
It wouldn't surprise me. Of course, the happiest place in the UK is the Naked Scientist studio every week.
Of course it is. Now, this is something that Kat mentioned earlier, which is that when people go for operations, there's always a worry of, is the surgeon going to leave something inside me after they've stitched me up?
Like their golf
literally
clubs or
stitched you
something.
up. Well, more usually scalpels and swabs, but there might be a solution to this because published in this month's edition of the Archives of Surgery, Alex Macario, who's an anaesthetist at Stanford University in America, has tested a way of finding out whether there's things left behind in you using exactly the same method that's used to thwart shoplifters. So when you're in the supermarket or in the dress shop, in the clothes shop, and there are those
You're
tags.
You're often in a dress shop, Chris.
Well, I'm married, I have a wife, I'm obliged to attend occasionally. But
Lovely skirt, by the way.
When you're going around the dress shop and you can see these tags on things, and when you walk out the door they set the alarms off, as happens to you frequently, Kat, when you're trying to nick stuff.
Yeah.
Those things use what's called an RF tag. So there's an emitter by the door which sends a signal. When it interacts with one of those tags, it sends back a radio frequency which the machine is sensitive to, and that's what sounds the alarm. Well, these guys are testing exactly the same idea in terms of operative instruments. So you'd have swabs which have these tiny tags in them, you'd have scalpels with these tags attached, and they did a simple trial, and they got a surgeon who didn't know that something had been hidden inside a patient. Obviously not before they stitched the patient up, but they put some things in the patient and then got someone to come along with a wand that can detect these things, and in less than 3 seconds they found any of the offending items when they were in there. So what they're suggesting is if they can miniaturise these RF tags, which are roughly the size at the moment of a small coin, then they can get them down to a much smaller size, so they're less intrusive and less annoying for the surgeon trying to use small instruments, for example. They could actually make operations a great deal safer, but I should add that actually only one operation in every 10,000 is complicated by this kind of thing. So it's still a really low risk, but it's still an important addition to safe operative practice.
And will it save money? How much does it cost to salvage someone who's had a scalpel left in them? That's the question. Anyway, some news that has come from researchers working together in Spain, Italy and Germany, who've been studying microorganisms that live in the sea. Now, these are bacteria, and what they love to live on, which I can't quite understand, is crude oil. So there's very few species that can actually live on crude oil because it's very yucky, basically. And the only source of energy in it is hydrocarbons, which most organisms can't break down. But there's these little bacteria called Alcanivorax borcumensis, got that right, which just live on hydrocarbons. And now finally these researchers have actually been studying the genetic code that makes up these bacteria and have worked out the genetic sequence of the oil-eating enzymes within them. Now, why is this important? Well, we have genetic engineering techniques that mean we can take the DNA that encodes for these enzymes and then stick it into other more easily to grow bacteria. And they could be used maybe to mop up oil spills by eating the oil in the future. And also this has benefit because these oil-degrading bacteria live on something called a biofilm, which is a film of oil, usually found on the where oil and water meet. So, for example, on the surface of a sea, in an oil slick. But also in our bodies, bacteria live in the interface between oil and water, for example, on our skin. And so if we can work out how bacteria are interacting with oil and water and maybe the enzymes that are responsible for it, then it could have a lot of benefits into understanding how humans get infected with bacteria and maybe blocking that in the future.
Thanks, Kat. It's Chris and Kat, and we're the Naked Scientists here with you this week talking about the science of crowd control, the psychology of riots and football hooligans. We'll be talking about that very shortly. We'll also be talking about the dating game, If You're a Mosquito, with Gay Gibson. If you have any questions on that, then give us a call now, 08459 25 2000, email chris@nakedscientist.com, or send us a text on 07786 20 1960. Our teaser this week, and we have loads of prizes up for grabs. You can win almost just by entering. We want to know what's the substance that makes plants look green and enables them to soak up sunlight and carbon dioxide to make food and oxygen. We've heard from Olivia, who's in Western Coville, Margaret in Corby, Sophie's in Ipswich, and Deborah's in Ipswich, and they all have all got the answer right so far. So it's anybody's game. What do you think the answer to that question is? Just give us a call if you reckon you know. And remember, for kitchen science this evening, that's going to be fantastic. And we want actually you to take part in this. You need an oven shelf, a couple of bits of string, yourself, and a good sense of humour, a camera, because we want you to take a picture of yourself doing this, and the best picture is going to win a prize this evening, because I think this will be fantastic. And then you'll need an assistant with a wooden spoon to make your oven shelf ring for you. That's coming up very, very shortly. Derek's out there at Hinchingbrook School. But since Kat was talking about bacteria that people are interested in using to do interesting things, well, here's a discovery that could quite literally be worth its weight in gold, because a US researcher called Anna Louise Reisenbach from Portland State University has found a class of extreme bacteria that can thrive in acid and near boiling water. Now, these are so-called thermoacidophiles, and they've been found in hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, and they might be able to help now above the ground because they could help in the extraction of precious metals from the debris that's left over in mines.
At deep-sea hydrothermal vents, where the hydrothermal fluid, that very high-temperature hot fluid that comes from deep within the Earth's crust, that fluid, which is pH of about 3.5, when it mixes with the cold seawater, it makes these beautiful chimneys, these chimney structures, these rocks, these porous rocks. And it's been predicted that in those chimneys there are areas where there's low pH. And so you would expect that there would be microbes that would live at these low pH environments. And yet nobody has ever discovered a thermoacidophile, which is an organism that grows at low pH and at high temperature from deep-sea vents.
How did you actually recover these ones?
Basically, we used a remotely operated vehicle called Jason 2, which is a little vehicle that's tethered to a ship, and we can send it down. We have pilots that manipulate these hydraulic arms that then take samples for us at the bottom of the ocean. And then once in the lab, we just ground up the rocks, kept the rocks anaerobic, because this organism's anaerobic, doesn't like oxygen, and we then inoculated bits of that rock into our acid media, and then managed to get this little bug to grow.
What do you think the applications of them might be? Because the mind boggles. You've got something which grows under extremely severe conditions.
One of the applications would be in biomining, where the mine tailings are often very acidic, And there are organisms, thermoacidophiles, from terrestrial hot springs that are used to remove some of the last bits of the precious metals. So this organism could potentially also be used for such an application.
And what are you going to do next? Will you be sending Jason back for some more samples, or will you be focusing your attention on the one bug you have got so far?
I think we're going to focus for the moment on looking at the distribution of this organism at other deep-sea vents. So we have some samples from many different deep-sea vent environments, and so we've been trying to isolate it from some of the other places around the world. So, for example, the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the East Pacific Ocean. This one came from the Southwest Pacific. So we're trying to look at the distribution and see if its relatives are similar, if they share the same characteristics of being acid-loving, heat-loving deep-sea vent microbes.
That's Anna Louise Racenbach talking to me in this week's Nature podcast.
And we've had an email here from Mike, who, not sure where he is. Oh, Rhode Island, here he is. And he points out that life on Earth gets its energy either directly or indirectly from the sun. But there are these deep-sea animals, organisms, for example, that we've just heard about, that live off the energy from sulfides that pour out of the deep-sea vents, and they don't receive any energy from the sun. He mentions the Pompeii worm, not sure what that one looks like. But is it plausible for a planet to have enough geothermal activity like this to sustain a robust ecosystem without receiving any energy from a star? What do we think?
Well, people were quite interested in a number of moons around other planets. For instance, originally people were thinking about Titan because it has a rich supply of organic molecules and because it's in orbit around a very large planet, Saturn, which has a very strong gravitational field, which in the case of some moons is sufficient to stretch and compress moons. I think Europa is an example of this. Obviously that's around another planet, but the strong compression and expansion of the planet caused by gravity creates a lot of heat, and people think this might be sufficient to cause water to exist in a liquid form on those worlds, and therefore they might be a possible spawning ground for new life. The thing about the hydrothermal vents on Earth is that the life that you find there, in the same way that Anne-Louise Racenbach was just saying there, is that they've all evolved originally from bacteria which lived on and depended on the sun's energy, and then they made their way and became specialised for ocean floor dwelling. They didn't evolve there as a new form of life, so it's just very slightly different, I suppose.
I don't think it's not plausible, though. I think it's perfectly plausible that something could evolve to live on energy that way.
I suppose so, but the ones we have here at the moment do depend on processes and resources that are supplied to the planet by the sun in order to survive.
Fancy listening to The Naked Scientists in your bed, on your way to work, or even at work? Why not subscribe to our podcast? For more information, visit nakedscientist.com/podcast.
Now, here's the moment you've all been waiting for. Time to head over to Hinchingbrook School to join Derek and Dave, who are with their assistants Matt and Nick, and an oven shelf. Derek, what you up to?
Hello, welcome to Hinchingbrook School, where we've come today to do some more fantastic science experiments with some of the guys who are here at the school. And with me, of course, is Dave, fellow naked scientist, who's set up the experiment today. So, Dave, quickly, what is it we're going to be doing?
We're going to be building a gong out of an oven shelf.
We're going to be building a gong out of an oven shelf. Sounds brilliant. OK, and also we've got two volunteers who've come from Hinchingbrook School today. So could you just tell me your names and what years you're in, please?
I'm Matt. I'm in Year 12.
I'm Nick, and I'm also in Year 12.
OK, brilliant. And guys, do you do science? Are you into science?
Yeah, I study biology, chemistry and physics.
OK, he's hardcore. Can you equal that, Nick?
Not really, just physics for me, but I like it.
OK, but we reckon with knowledge of physics, glad to hear you like it, we reckon with knowledge of physics you'll still be able to kind of maybe even explain this experiment for us, so let's hope you can do that. OK then, so you at home, you definitely can do this experiment, and I trust you, there's some amazing, amazing stuff for you to hear if you do this experiment yourselves at home, so it's going to be great. What you need is an oven shelf, right, so basically one of those kind of metal shells out of your oven. You also need 2 bits of string, each of which are about 1 metre long. And finally, you need some kind of blunt implement for bashing the oven shelf with. So a wooden spoon or a metal spoon, something like that is absolutely fine. OK, and Dave, what are we going to do with these things? How do we set it up?
It's really simple, Derek. All you do is you take your oven shelf, you tie one piece of string to each end of one side of it. You then wind the other end of the 2 pieces of string around your fingers, stick your fingers in your ears and get someone to hit the oven shelf.
Okay, and tell us what you hear. So there you go. It's that easy. So you've got to basically take the oven shelf. You've got to tie a piece of string to one corner, tie another piece of string to the corner next to that. So it's kind of hanging a bit like a picture on your wall or something. But there are two separate pieces of string here. And then you've got to wind the other ends of those bits of string around an index finger. So that's two index fingers wound up, and then stick those fingers in your ears and get someone to bash it and tell us what you hear. And of course, we've got Matt and Nick, who here at Hinchingbrook School are going to be doing this for us very, very shortly. So what do you think you're going to hear, Matt, when you do that?
Probably a very loud noise.
OK, and Nick, I mean, he says very loud noise. Any more detail than that? What do you think you might hear?
I'm thinking maybe a ringing or a buzzing.
All right, OK, well, we'll find out. That could be right. It may not be right, but we will find out later on. So what we'd like you at home to do is to try this as well. And if you can do it and get the right result to us, then you can win a prize. So the number for you to call is 08459 25 2000. And the email is chris@thenakedscientist.com. So please do get in touch with us as soon as you have bashed that oven shelf. OK, then, it's back to the studio now, but we'll be back later on the show with the answer and what's going on as well from Dave. So it's back to you until then.
Thanks, Derek. And if you can send us a picture of yourself doing that, then just email it in to chris@thenakedscientist.com, and there's going to be a prize for the best picture. And in fact, the first person through with the best picture and the best observation as to exactly what happens. You will not fail to be impressed if you try this. It's Chris and Kat here on The Naked Scientists, going to be talking very, very shortly to Clifford Stott about riot control.
The Naked Scientists, supported by the Wellcome Trust.
Clifford, thanks for coming in and talking to us about this. Could you just give us a sort of gentle introduction to your work?
A gentle introduction? I'm not sure if that's easy. I suppose, in a sense, what I've been working on with John as well, that you've got on today, is basically a scientific model, a theoretical model of what makes collective behaviour in crowd events possible from a psychological point of view, so the psychology of crowd behaviour. And from that theoretical model, from that science, we've been able to start asking very important, difficult, but practically important questions about the way we manage crowds out in society, particularly at these critical times where we get violence in political demonstrations, in football crowds, and various other events like that.
And you went out and joined in the World Cup, but not to watch the football, actually to watch the people.
Yes, I mean it's one of the difficulties I have. I'm always working. I can't switch off. So if I go to a football match, I spend most of my time looking at the crowd, not the game. But I'm starting to come to terms with that. But basically, yes, I go along, I take a team of researchers with me, and we spend lots of time in crowd events, just basically making systematic observations, looking at events, and in particular we focus on interactions, and the particularly important interactions that we look at are between the police and football fans, because what we found is that those interactions are critically important in determining how people behave in a crowd event, particularly as this relates to the emergence of widespread rioting.
So what do you do? Do you look for hot spots in the crowd where you think trouble's about to break out and then watch that sort of dynamic going on? Or do you just chance it and hope that some trouble will break out near you, in which case I don't want to come to a football match with you?
Well, we're pretty good at our job, so we do end up, quite often being in the right place at the right time. But yes, it's particularly opportunistic, and in part that's why we study football crowds, because we always know where football crowds are going to be. We know that there's a high likelihood of problems around football matches. We know that the police are almost invariably going to be there, so it makes that opportunistic kind of approach to studying crowds a lot more fruitful, because we tend to see a lot more going on in crowd events in the context of football, and of course from that we can learn so much more about how crowds work.
So what do you think it is? What's the recipe that turns a crowd of people that are there just to support something they view as fun, a football match, into something in which they become quite aggressive and often murderous?
Strong. A bit like your opinion about Germans there, I think. Well, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about how crowds work. But one of the things, I think, to put it as simply as possible, that we've begun to understand is that crowd behaviour is really an outcome of particular forms of interaction. That the way groups interact during a crowd event, and one must remember that the police are a group present during most crowd events, the way groups interact with one another has a fantastic impact on how crowds behave and on their psychology. In particular, in relationship to people's senses of what's right and proper behaviour, and also what's possible, what it's possible for people to do collectively. And that dynamic of what we call legitimacy and power, it really functions to make particular forms of collective behaviour possible. So what we find is that where the police act against the crowd in ways that crowd members see as wrong, and when the police are particularly indiscriminate in their treatment of crowd members, those are the kinds of conditions where riots tend to develop.
So, for example, if they see police beating up a woman or something like that, or apparently picking on someone when they shouldn't be.
Yes, exactly. It's that kind of sense of the police are doing something wrong. One must remember here that what we're talking about is a psychological dynamic. It doesn't really matter whether the police are actually doing that or not. What matters is that there's this emergent perception of that in the crowd, and it's really that subjectivity that drives collective action. So where people feel that the police are doing something wrong, that tends to make them feel as though acting against the police is right.
So sort of a sense of group injustice about it.
Exactly, yes.
And what causes a football riot to kick off, or any sort of big event like this? What nucleates it?
Well, it's very, very complex. I mean, if we had an answer to that question right now, I don't think I'd have a job. But what we're looking at is to try and change people's views about why crowd violence happens in the context of football. Overwhelmingly, people have got an opinion about this, and that opinion is generally that football violence is caused by football hooligans. But what we're beginning to find is that that's not really a very good way of looking scientifically at the problem. Of course, science is all about bringing to bear theoretical knowledge and empirical data on a particular issue. And what we find is that this whole idea of hooliganism is completely useless when it comes to understanding these riots.
Are the police elsewhere in the world doing it any better than we are here?
There's good practice and bad practice all over the world. I think that one of the what we do is to look at the dynamics of social conflict. I think, to be perfectly honest with you, the kinds of dynamics that we expose in our study of football violence have a great deal of applicability, and I think that they can make sense of the escalation of violence, for example, in the Lebanon at the moment. So these are, I think, general processes of the psychology and social dynamics of social conflict. And basically, I think there's a great deal of generality there about how we understand it.
Thanks, Clifford. Clifford Stott from the University of Liverpool. He's here for the rest of the programme, and if you'd like to ask him any questions, you can call now, Chris and Kat on The Naked Scientist, 08459 25 2000. Send me an email, chris@nakedscientist.com, or a text on 07786 20 1960. Don't forget our teaser this week, which is that we want to know what's the substance in plants that makes them look green, and it enables them to soak up the energy from the sun and mop up carbon dioxide to produce oxygen and food. If you think you know the answer, could be some great prizes in it for you. We've heard so far from Norman in Hunstanton. He's definitely on the right lines. We've heard from Pat in Kent, Norma in West Runton, Shirley in Deering, and Rowena in Essex. They're all doing very well, as is Steve, who texted in from London. Those are all going in the hat, so it's everybody's game right now if you want to have a go at that one. Right, Kat.
We're now going to head across the pond for this week's Science Update with Chelsea Wilde and Bob Hirschon to find out, amongst other things, a computer programme designed to counsel teenagers.
This week for The Naked Scientists, we'll talk about an indigenous South American language that places the past ahead of people and the future behind them. But first, or last, or, well now, Chelsea tells us about a new computer program that speaks the language of teenage girls.
The program guides girls as they reflect on emotional events, much like a therapist would. Its developer is MIT graduate student Chandra Daly.
The idea is not to replace a therapist, but the idea is that, sometimes you can't reach a therapist. Could the system sort of help in the meantime, or could it help to support a counselor in their efforts rather than replace them?
When girls use the program, they first write and illustrate a real story from their own lives. Then the program uses a technology called common sense reasoning to guess how the girls feel about the story. Finally, the girls respond to the program by agreeing or disagreeing with the guess and weighing the strength of their emotions. Daly says she tested this program with a small group of girls over several weeks. Compared to a control group, the girls who used the program started being more emotionally expressive in their writing.
If in their first story they said A happened, B happened, C happened, by their last story they were saying A happened and it made me feel like this.
She says this program could have a place in schools because students' emotional problems often get in the way of learning. She also plans to make the program available to all girls via the web.
Thanks, Chelsea. The indigenous Aymara people of South America have no future ahead of them. That's because, unlike any other known culture, they refer to the future being behind them and the past ahead. This according to Rafael Nunez, a cognitive scientist at the University of California at San Diego. He says this metaphorical reversal goes beyond figures of speech to gestures and body language, suggesting the Aymara have an entirely different concept of time.
So it's kind of a deeper understanding of the flexibility and the potentials of the human body and brain to provide the basis for abstraction.
He adds that Aymara culture and language emphasize the eyewitness point of view, which may explain why they visualize their past experiences right before their eyes and the future, which they haven't seen, behind them.
Thanks, Bob. Next time we'll learn about how pregnancy sickness might actually have some evolutionary reason for existing. Until then, I'm Chelsea Wald.
And I'm Bob Hirschon for AAAS, the Science Society. Back to you, Naked Scientists.
Thanks, Bob. So there you go. You've got your whole future behind you, apparently. Anyway, next coming up, we're going to find out how people are getting on with their kitchen science. It's not too late to email in chris@nakedscientist.com or get calling in 08459 25 2000.
We've heard from Daniel in Kent. He's had a go at our experiment, and just in case you've just tuned in, you get an oven shelf, put 2 bits of string, one on each corner, wrap the 2 bits of string around your fingers and shove them in your ears, and then you get someone friendly to get a nice wooden spoon or something like that and give the oven shelf a little bit of a whack for you. What does it sound like? Daniel was well impressed, and you will be too if you have a go. First person to send us a photograph of themselves actually doing it, just get your camera phone out or a digital camera, take a photo and email it in, chris@nakedscientist.com. We'll give you a prize. Get going now, 08459 25 2000 if you have any questions about our other topics this evening, which is what turns a crowd into a riot, how do we evacuate people from dangerous situations most safely, and also how mosquitoes find the other mosquitoes they want to mate with.
Stripping down science.
Okay, let's do it.
The Naked Scientists.
And now we're going to go and talk to John Drury, who's at the University of Essex.
Sussex.
Sorry. My mistake.
Okay.
It is late. We're going to talk about crowds and crowd control. So anyone who was in London around about this time last year was shocked to the core by the bombings. And how do you start evacuating people from a situation like that?
Well, I think I want to step back first of all and question the concept of crowd control, because there's a kind of hidden assumption there that the crowd is a problem and it's down to the authorities to deal with the problems of the crowd. And the problems of the crowd are understood in terms of its reduced intelligence, its irrationality, its over-emotional behaviour, its inability to control itself, and susceptibility to uncritical social influence. Now, these ideas go back over 100 years when crowd science first emerged, and you see them in the work of the ideas of the police, which Clifford's been talking about, and also in many procedures for evacuating crowds.
So how instead should we look at crowds?
Well, the first thing to point out is it's in common sense language, common sense discourse, if you like, the notion of panic, that when there's an emergency, people will panic. And when we say panic, what we mean is people will overreact, they will become selfish, competitive, individualised, and ultimately ineffective in their attempts to escape as they all get in each other's way. But, sorry,
and then, so how should we then get people out of situations like that in the most calm way possible? Is there any way to stop people panicking?
Well, the point I'm trying to make is that panic is actually a myth, because 50 years of research on actual disasters and emergencies have found no evidence at all of panic behaviour. What is more common is people obviously feeling fear, but evacuating in a relatively orderly way. Helping each other is very common. deaths are often due not so much to people panicking, but to people often trying to stay behind and stay with those they want to help to get out, because they're often in small groups of people and they're trying to help those less able than themselves.
So people don't run around like headless chickens, as you might imagine.
This is a myth. I mean, everybody commented after the bombings last year, it was full of, in all the accounts, how calm everybody was, how much helping there was. And it was characterised in terms of something about London, something about British identity or London identity. We all do this. But in fact, it's a universal phenomena. Help and coordination, cooperation is a universal phenomena in emergencies.
It's interesting, John, because we've had a call from John in Colchester, and he's wondering if things like pheromones or chemicals could be used to control riots and crowds. And I know that in the United States, a lot of research has been sunk into things like microwave guns that can blast plasma at people and give them a little bit of pain if they step into the beam of it, which is a good way of pushing people into submission, isn't it? And also, there was a group in Washington, I think it was Washington, that were working on the world's worst smell. So you would unleash this smell on people, and it quite literally reduces you to a sort of quivering heap on the ground, trying to hold down the contents of your stomach because it's so unpleasant.
Yeah, well, this goes back to my earlier point. Where crowd science arose from was the perception by those in power that the crowd is a problem. So how do we deal with the problem of the crowd? Turn it round, the crowd is actually the solution. Social change comes about through crowds. Progressive social change comes about through crowds. The most uplifting, the most constructive and the most empowering and inspiring events in terms of emergencies are due to processes within the crowd itself. There's a concept called resilience used by the government, used by sociologists looking at disasters. What does that refer to? It refers to a natural quality of people to respond in a constructive and humane way and to network and to coordinate through their own natural resources.
I was reading the paper this morning, and a classic problem in sort of large groups of people trying to do stuff is trying to get on an aeroplane. And there's all various models that researchers are looking at to try and work out the best way to put people on a plane. And they were saying that people do just get in each other's way in that situation. You should put people into the window seats first. I mean, where you have a lot of people trying to get somewhere at once, is there a better way we could be doing this?
I haven't really got a solution to that question, but I'll give you a comparison which sheds some light on the issue and the point I'm making and then the point you're making. Think of a crowd of commuters on, say, the Central Line and how they behave and how they feel. They are packed close together, they feel uncomfortable, they don't meet each other's eyes, they find physical proximity unpleasant. They are a physical crowd. They're crowded together, but they don't see themselves or understand themselves as part of a whole. Take the same situation, yet this crowd is a crowd of football supporters who've just seen their team have a victory in, say, the FA Cup final. They are together, they are singing together. Physical contact, physical proximity there is an enjoyable thing. So there's something about being a psychological crowd, i.e. seeing yourself as a crowd, which makes people put others first, be self-sacrificial, coordinate, cooperate, communicate, whereas in a physical crowd, the crowd of individual consumers who are competing for space as individuals on a plane, in a shopping centre, the lack of unity stems from the lack of shared identity, because those people have no shared interest.
John, thank you very much for joining us. Hang around in case anyone wants to ask any questions. That's John Drury from the University of Sussex. If you'd like to join us on The Naked Scientist and ask any questions about what we were discussing, football hooliganism, riots, riot control, crowds, and the safest way to get people out of danger, 08459 25 2000. Send us a text 07786 20 1960 or email chris@nakedscientist.com. Now, people are loving our kitchen science this evening. Catherine in Deeping St James and Rose in Essex and Hedra in Cambridge have all had a go at our other quiz, and they've all got the answer right. And June and her husband have just tried kitchen science, and they say it's like a miniature Big Ben going off inside your head. So they obviously got stuck into that. And Hayden in Thetford has tried it and said it's like a big drum going off inside your head. So if you would like to have a go, get your oven shelf, 2 bits of string on each corner, wrap them around your index fingers, stuff them in your ears and get someone to hit it with a spoon. What's going to happen and why? Can you explain why you're hearing these things? If you reckon you know the answer, get calling now 08459 25 2000.
Stripping down science.
Okay, let's do it.
The Naked Scientists.
It is the Naked Scientists, Chris and Kat, and our guest in the studio as well this week to talk about something slightly different than crowd control is Gay Gibson from the University of Greenwich. Hi, Gay.
Hi.
Now, you work on mosquitoes.
Yeah,
and you published a paper the other day which really sort of everyone was buzzing about, I suppose you could say, about how they tell male from female, because I'd never really considered that would be a problem.
Right. Well, it's not so far off the topic that the other people have been talking about, because when mosquitoes mate, they generally get together in a crowd of males, all gather at the same place in the same time.
A bit like a mosquito nightclub, basically.
That's right, yeah.
But why do they do that? Why would you get all the males together?
Well, the males really have nothing else to do in life except hang around and mate.
That's much like humans, then.
It's the females that go around biting and sucking blood and producing baby mosquitoes, but the males really have nothing else to do.
Because the males just drink sort of sugary solution, don't they?
That's right. They don't need...
I mean, the reason females drink the blood is because it's rich in protein.
Yeah. And they need that protein to produce the eggs for the next generation.
So you've got a big flock of males buzzing about.
Yeah.
How does an interaction between a male and a female mosquito happen then?
Well, the first problem is all these males are swirling about each other, and they've got to not waste too much time chasing each other, because that would lead to nothing. And that's really where the problem started for me. I tried to work out how exactly do they save their energy for actually chasing the right female when she comes along. And it's taken a sort of long and hard think about things, but the mosquitoes have very specialized antennae, and the males have very elaborate ones, and we already knew something about this, that if you hum at a male, anybody out there can do this. You can find these clouds of mosquitoes over bushes at around, sunset. You see clouds of gnats, we would call them, because they don't bite you. They're just male mosquitoes and slightly other related insects. If you hum at them, sort of...
Excellent impression, wasn't it?
Well, this whole cloud of mosquitoes will come right into your face. So don't sing, because they'll go right in your mouth if you try that. Anyway, those males are coming at your face because they think you might be a female. So the males come zooming towards a female.
How are they sensing that?
It's the vibration of the wing beats of an actual female, or the vibration of your hum. It stimulates their antenna, and then that signal goes to the mosquito's brain, and it transforms that into a change in its wing beats, moving towards the sound it heard.
So could you use that as a way of baiting a trap for mosquitoes then? Could you have something that releases a rather aggravating sound, admittedly, but could you then suck all the males in so there's nothing to make with the females and the population would plummet?
Yeah, this is exactly the idea that had come to several scientists a few decades ago. And you can build huge loudspeakers, and you can pull in millions of males that way. The trouble is, it doesn't take many males left behind to do the job for the rest of the females.
A few lucky males that are deaf.
Exactly.
At the time. But what about the females? Do they not respond in the same way?
Well, no one really knew what kind of behaviour there was with females, because if you play a sound to them, they don't seem to change the way they fly. They just go about their business. But it bothered me, because we hadn't really investigated females very, very deeply. So I went to a colleague of mine. I'd graduate of University of Sussex myself, so I went back to my old tutor and said, hang on, you know about sound, he works with bats and so forth, and do you think it's possible that these two could hear each other? And we did a series of experiments to try and demonstrate what kind of, or investigate what kind of behaviour the females might have. And indeed, we uncovered a lovely duet.
So you've given me the samples, the sound samples.
Yes.
Now, anyone who is mosquito-phobic or doesn't like the sound of things that remotely resemble dental drills, then you might want to cover your ears very slightly when you play this. But Gay, talk us through this and what these recordings are, and we'll play them.
Okay, well, the first thing to say would be, let's listen to what two males would sound like. So in this cloud of swarming males, you've got two males near each other. They have to be pretty close together, sort of 10 centimetres apart. Now, that's what we did in our experiment. We held on, tethered two mosquitoes near each other, and we let them listen to each other and recorded what the effect was. So this is what it sounded like when you get two males talking to each other.
So what you'll get is the first one, and then you'll hear the other one come in subsequently, and what they're listening for is the actual beating of the wings.
Right, they're having a little conversation, and see what that sounds like.
Okay, here we go.
That's the first male. The second comes in. Now, if that doesn't grate on your ears, nothing does.
Okay, I think that's enough of that. So basically there's just two lots of wings flapping away there.
That's right. There's a really discordant sound. I mean, that's just not got anything attractive about it. Now, if you were to do something else this time, let's start off with a male, and then a female comes along, and let's see what that sounds like. There's the male. Here comes a female, a little all over the place. Oh, isn't that sweet? They
harmony.
get together.
So actually they synchronise their wing beats.
They do. They move towards each other. It was a little hard unless we listened to it over again more carefully, but they don't. They both move a little bit towards each other, and they overshoot, and it goes a little all over the place, but give them enough time, they get right into the same register.
And so by synchronising their wing beats, one's telling the other one I'm male, the other one's saying the other one I'm female.
That's right.
And then they know that they
That's
should
right.
pair off.
Yep.
So does then vision take over? So then they get close enough they can see each other, and then they know who they're dealing with.
Well, their
who they're
vision's
flapping their
not
wings
at
at.
all good enough for that. They've got very poor resolution in terms of vision. But what I mentioned earlier is that males move towards that source of sound, and when their wing beats are flapping about the same speed to make the same sound, they just kind of get in gear, and the male just catches up and grabs the female, and then contact senses take over then.
Now, can you just tell us, because people probably don't appreciate quite how hard that work is to do, to record two individual mosquitoes in an apparatus. How did you do that?
Well, as I say, we needed a lot of the fine engineering. The University of Sussex Neurobiology department there has really the kind of recording equipment, tiny little microphones that just pick up the sound near where the wing beats are. And then you simply, well, my side of it is easy, a little drop of beeswax on the back of each mosquito and a little
Sounds
stick.
easy, but, a mosquito, how big's that?
You're lassoing mosquitoes, basically.
Yes, indeed.
Wow.
So the obvious spin-off of this, as we've already explored, is it's possible to lure mosquitoes into traps and things using this. But does this add any additional details that we might be able to exploit in control of diseases like malaria and things like that?
Well, I think I might start with one, which is there's a kind of misconception that you can affect female behaviour with a sound. There are these buzzers, repellent buzzers, that are meant to repel female mosquitoes. And we've tested them scientifically, and there really isn't much evidence that these work. It's kind of like the upside-down version of the story. Males are attracted to females, but females aren't repelled, or they don't really move about. So that's one kind of product which is slightly misguided in its premise. But the more important thing that I was trying to understand was really how these mosquitoes can establish themselves in such a environment where there are very few of them left, say at the end of a season, but they can find each other so efficiently. I wouldn't say there's a good practical outcome immediately to do with the sound and mating behaviour, but of course that's only one part of my investigations of mosquito behaviour, and those are far more applied.
It's Gay Gibson from the Natural Resources Institute at the University of Greenwich. If you have any questions for us, Chris and Kat here at The Naked Scientists, 08459 25 2000, text 07786 20 1960, or email chris@nakedscientists.com. And our teaser this evening, don't forget, what's the substance that makes plants look green and is the way in which they capture the energy of sunlight and turn it into food and oxygen for us to breathe? What is that stuff? You could win yourself a prize. Kat?
We've actually had an email in here from Mauro Ferreira, who's in Dublin in Ireland. He says, loves the show, by the way, just voted for us in the Podcast Awards. Can people vote for us in the Podcast Awards, Chris? Is that up there?
I wish they
now?
would, because we've actually, The Naked Scientist has been shortlisted. We're in the top 5 in the world, in fact, for science podcasts. We're one of the nominated podcasts, and you can help us to win if you go to podcastawards.com and give us a vote if you like our show.
Laying the facts bare, The Naked Scientists.
Clifford, I've got a quick question here which has been sent in, and it's again from Mauro Ferreira, who's in Dublin in Ireland. And he says, it's been suggested the police can trigger the public's reaction by being heavy-handed. We know the police tend to be more heavy-handed towards some more aggressive supporters, such as the English. Is this a hen and egg problem? Can you comment on this, please?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's very much kind of the kind of process that we focus in on. We call it a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the expectation that a large crowd of supporters is going to pose a problem, and then what you do is you throw resources at it because you feel that you need to control it. And the idea, again, as John pointed out, is very Lebonian, very traditional, this idea of the crowd as irrational, it's dangerous, it needs to be controlled. So resources are thrown at it. expectation is violence is going to be there, so officers are stressed, they're wearing protective equipment, they're much more likely to lash out. And then if a small incident occurs in that crowd, then what we see is this, what people call heavy-handed reaction, but basically large numbers of police officers driving forcefully into the crowd, and that crowd contains people that haven't done anything wrong, that haven't been involved in violence, and certainly didn't intend to be involved in violence. And then they find themselves being basically physically assaulted and think, well, hang on a minute, I haven't done anything wrong here. Why are you treating me like that? And that draws that person and those people in the crowd towards violence when they had no intention prior to police intervention of engaging in violence.
Thank you for answering that question. Let's just have a quick chat to John, who is with June. Hi, John.
Hello.
We've got to talk about this in about 15 seconds, but what did you find in Kitchen Science?
What I found is it sounded just like the chime of, say, Big Ben, for example.
Going off inside your head?
That's correct.
Well, shall we find out if you're right? Let's go back. Stay on the line, John. Let's go back to Derek and Dave, who are at Hinchingbrook School with Matt and Nick. Derek, what's the answer?
Hello there, welcome back to Hinchingbrook School, and we've got an oven shelf hanging from 2 bits of string, and it's all ready with Matt and Nick of Hinchingbrook School to kind of tell us the result of the experiment that we've been setting up. So, Dave, who's with me, if you could tell these guys what to do.
Well, first of all, should we just listen to the oven shelf normally? So if Nick could just hit the oven shelf and we can listen to it.
OK, so Nick's actually armed with kind of a pen, which he's going to use as a beater to hit it with. And Matt is ready holding the shelf, but he's not sticking his fingers in his ears yet. So go for it, Nick. OK, then. So, Matt, what does that sound like?
Just like a ringing sort of sound.
Right, now, stick those fingers in your ears. Oh, he's very nervous. He doesn't know what's going to happen. Right, now then, we want you to tell us, Matt, as soon as Nick starts hitting this thing, what it sounds like. Here we go.
Oh, it's a much lower ringing sound.
OK, then. Now, Nick, we want you not just to hit it once, all right? That was obviously a good effort, but we want you to give him a bit of a concert here, OK? If you could kind of play this thing like you're a professional xylophone player, right? So put your fingers back in your ears, Matt. Right, here we go. That's sort of, thank you, Nick. How do you like your performance?
Equal to Mozart.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and how did it sound, Matt, listening to that?
Well, it's a very low ringing sound, and yeah, just that.
And can you think of a musical instrument that it sounded like? Well, we say it sounds like a gong, personally. Now, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Anyway, it's much, much lower, and it really doesn't sound like the oven shelf used to sound at all. Now, we are aware, of course, that you at home, listening, have not actually been able to hear what Matt was hearing. If you did this experiment at home, then you have heard it, and I very much hope you have done it. But if not, then we have actually set up a little setup here so that you can hear what's going on. We've actually wrapped up a microphone in the string, and we're just going to give it a little hit, and then you will be able to hear what it sounds like. Right then, so there you go. That is what it sounds like, and it does sound absolutely fabulous. So there we go. Dave, what we want to know, of course, is what is going on here. Why are we hearing a much lower pitched sound when we've kind of got this set up?
Well, first of all, we've got to understand what sound is. Now, the way you hear me talking is that my voice box vibrates, which makes the air vibrate. Then what you actually hear is your ear vibrating. Now, what the sound is travelling through and what kind of sound it is can affect how much energy gets to your ear, so how loud it feels.
OK, so when we're listening to you, we're hearing the sound travel through air, right?
Yes. So an air is really sloppy. It's like really fluid and it's not very stiff. So especially if you move something slowly through it, it's very hard to get much energy into it. This is why if you want to have a deep bass speaker, it's got to be absolutely enormous. To get the energy into the air, you've got to have a huge board moving backwards and forwards. Now, the higher the frequency, the faster you're wobbling backwards and forwards, the stiffer the air feels. It's a bit like water. If you move your hand through it slowly, it feels really fluid. But if you slap your hand down really hard on it or belly flop, it hurts like hell because it feels much more rigid.
OK, so you've talked about kind of moving your hand faster and so on. So how does that relate to sound?
Well, the higher the pitch, the faster the vibrations. So the high pitches can move from the oven shelf to your ears really well normally. But because the oven shelf is quite small, the low pitches can't move very well. So all you can hear when you just hit it is the high pitches. Now, if you put something quite stiff like a string, if you've got a complete connection from the shelf through the string to your ears, the string is quite stiff. So even the low vibrations can get through the string. So you can hear the low vibrations, which are always there, but now you can actually hear them.
So really then, the string is just a much better transmitter of the low vibrations and the low frequencies, and that's why we hear a much deeper sound. And in fact, the oven shelf, when we hit it and when we just listen to it through air, it's still producing those low vibrations, but it's just that we can't actually hear them through the air.
Yeah, they're very, very quiet. You can't hear them.
OK, well, thanks for that explanation, Dave. And I think Matt and Nick, you both, did that make sense to you?
Yes, perfect sense.
OK, then. And Nick actually was doing the banging of the oven shelf earlier, so didn't get to hear it. So finally, we're just going to give Nick a chance to hear what it sounds like and commentate on it. So Matt's going to be doing his kind of xylophone Mozart job, and Nick's going to be listening. So let's go for it, guys. Tell us what it sounds like, Nick.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. So there you go. If you've not heard this beautiful sound at home yet, then please do get out your oven shelf and get some string on it and see what you hear with your fingers stuck in your ears. Fantastic. Thank you very much to you guys, Matt and Nick from Hinchingbrook School, and also to Dave for doing all the explanations and setting it all up. And that's all for this week, and we'll be back next time with more Kitchen Science. So until then, it's goodbye.
Thanks, Derek and Dave, and your lovely assistants, Matt and Nick. So, how was that then?
Is that what you found, John?
I did. It sounded like the mice struck the oven grill a few times in different places. It's just like a sort of Big Ben chime.
A beautiful melody. Anyway, you've won a book, The Hidden Rules of English Behaviour, Watching the English by Kate Fox, so well done, thanks.
Thank you very much, John and June in their kitchen for taking part, and our winner this evening for the What is the Green Stuff in Plants? That's Catherine in Deeping St James. It was, of course, chlorophyll. Very quick question for you now, Gay. This is from John in Peterborough. If you were drunk, would the alcohol in your blood affect the mosquito?
Oh, dear. Difficult to answer that one, but I suspect she just wouldn't fly straight home.
Wouldn't be able to sort of attract a male because the wing beats would be all over the place.
The Naked Scientist Podcast, brought to you by thenakedscientist.com.
Well, that's it for this week, and thank you to everyone for giving up your time and listening to us. It's been great to have your company. And also thank you to our studio guests this week, Gay Gibson from the University of Greenwich, Clifford Stott from the University of Liverpool, and John Drury from the University of Sussex. Next week, it's our last show before we go off for 3 weeks on our summer holiday, which we do incidentally need very much. But we'll be celebrating the end of the series with a special Naked Science question and answer show, which means an hour of just your questions. So if you'd like to send them to me now, just email chris@nakedscientist.com or visit our website, nakedscientist.com, and under the Contact Us section, there's a feedback form. You can just type in your questions there and have them sent over to me. Now, I've got one final favour to ask you today, which is we have been nominated for this year's Podcast Awards in the Science and Technology section, and it's gone to a vote, which means that the only way we can win this thing is by getting more votes than the other 4 contenders. So if you think we deserve it and you enjoy listening to The Naked Scientist, then please do us the biggest favour we could ask you, which is take a trip to podcastawards.com and register a vote for The Naked Scientist. You can vote actually every single day if you want to, and we'd be grateful for as much support as you can give us. In the meantime, thanks once again for listening, and we'll see you next week.